Testing. Blah, 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 blah.
Ready, set, go.
It's time for the Coach Amy and Coach Liz show.
A podcast for endurance athletes by two athletes, two coaches, and a physical therapist.
We are your hosts, Coach Amy
And Coach Liz.
coming to you from
Kansas City.
Welcome back, people.
Hello.
We're going to talk about resistance training for endurance athletes and where it's trending. Oh, how about that?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so back in the day, for a long time, I was under the belief that resistance training, like, and when I'm talking about resistance training, I'm talking about like heavier lifting, right? And really building muscle strength was detrimental to my performance and sport. So I'd be like, stop giving me this heavy weight. I'm going to bulk up. It's that feeling of like, I'm going to bulk up and be too, have too much muscle mass or too heavy for my endurance long distance sport. And, that's not true. So kind of a falsehood. Now, when we're dealing with even some collegiate, long distance runners that I know now are trying to work towards, going ahead and building up some bulk, but they're still really nervous and they back off on their upper extremity because they worry about it being too much.
It's really interesting because I think there's a huge difference in the running community versus the triathlon community on that.
Oh, okay. So what does the triathlon community feel about it?
I mean, it's people do it and they're not doing it like,
and they're doing like, going ahead and getting heavy lifting, not
and
high reps, low weight, but
not generally, no. And that's, Stacy Sims has come out with a lot in the past, 5+ years about the benefits of heavy lifting, especially for women, especially as we get older. But there's not, most triathletes are interested in lifting and we're not concerned about bulking up.
Okay. So there's enough research and it's been out for long enough, like 5, 8, years. Okay. So that we know that this, there's been enough research. Again, continued research needs to be done in different scenarios and things, testing it in different ways. But more and more we're realizing that it is beneficial towards the sport to do that, to do heavy lifting. But it's still changing our mindset because it can take a lot longer to change the mindset. Even if we have the research to back it up, it can be scary for the people that have kind of grown up or believe and have been running for many years and think, oh no, we don't do that. That's not what we do. And it can be really hard to change it.
That's so interesting because that is such a runner thing.
Okay, so
it's not a triathlon.
Okay, we're going to talk to the runners then. You runners,
no, it's great.
Out there.
Yeah, no, I mean it's great. It's just it's there's some nuances and
differences
I think it's great
between the sport. And I want to say I do know some runners who do understand this difference and have made that change and haven't had any issue with making that change. So it's not all runners out there,
no.
But
it's a strain.
It is.
Sort of, well, and I think that kind of ties into a strain of being lighter and being faster. And I mean, there's a whole lot of.
I mean, we're buying shoes that have ounces of difference because it's going to make us lighter.
Yeah.
So we think, I'm going to add some muscle bulk.
And Molly Seidel over the past couple of years has talked a lot about that and like compromising the strength training for her performance, and because she didn't want to get bulk up and how detrimental that was. But it's just a really different feel in the running community than it is in the triathlon community.
It's tough. And but it's a falsehood because you're way more like, so kind of it's like the power that you're getting from that muscle strength, it outweighs the difference between, no pun intended, the added weight that the muscle brings on.
Yeah.
So, and that's what the research is showing us, is that for middle and long distance runners, that heavy lifting increases not just the muscle power, but improves your run economy and your performance. And there's enough data out there to support that now. There's an interesting research done more recently, and I found this fascinating. And that is, in this particular study, what they found is that, plyometric training, so that, for you guys who don't know what that is, because sometimes people look at me and like, what are you talking about? What's plyometric mean? That is sort of like the jumping, the single leg hopping, the box jumps, those kinds of things that are wiring us and strengthening us for that jumping part of running. Okay. And then we have the kind of the high load strength stuff. So that's our lower reps, higher weight. And we can get a little bit more into detail about what we mean by that. But those two things combined showed improvement in power, economy, and performance for runners who are running at an 8-minute, 30-second per mile or slower. It had benefits. But for runners who are faster than that, the plyometric didn't make any difference.
Well, and also plyometrics isn't something like that is very specific to benefit running, and the strength training for swimming and biking is really different for that.
Yeah.
Just to point that out, because you're talking about running right now.
I'm talking about running right now. So that difference in that, so in other words, it's faster runners with a higher VO2 max didn't benefit from the plyometric training, but did benefit from the high, load strength training. And, I don't remember if it was they talked about that in the article, or if I was just trying to figure out why that might be. But I think runners who are faster probably aren't going to make big gains in that plyometric training because they already have either that innate ability, that spring from their tendons, and it's kind of that neuromuscular wiring for that part of the sport. And they working on it more didn't necessarily develop or make a change for them where the heavy strength loading did. So I think that's the difference there. But anyway, a plug for runners who are running at an 8-minute and 30 seconds per mile pace or slower, that additions of plyometric strength training might be helpful for you.
Can we talk about how you do that? Because it is a nightmare for me to think about what people are going to start doing, because plyometrics are like it's hard landing on the body.
Yeah.
How do you introduce that?
Well, and I'm so glad that you said that, because we've talked about pre-acting, that notion of, anticipating your landing. I think we've had like 4 or 5 episodes now where we bring it in some way to talk about it, because it's a great opportunity to work on that. So if you think about, I'm jumping and I'm landing, it's like, I'm pounding more. Now isn't this stressing me out more? No, because it's the opportunity to work on that pre-acting and strength with that.
But so for example, when I start going back to doing plyometric work, I might start with 3 sets of 10 hops. And that's it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, how do you bring it in?
Yeah.
So, when I bring plyometric training in with people, with my athletes, so I'm hoping that when we get back into more fall, winter time, I'll have an indoor class on Tuesday nights for that. It's kind of like a circuit boot camp. But people who are newer to it, or if you're just bringing this back in, we're going to do double leg activities, not single leg. So we'll plyometric jumping, hopping on 2 legs, right? And then also, just like with anything, we're going to bring it in slowly and gradually in terms of number of, sets and reps. And you can change up how that jumping is occurring in different planes to get different loads, so that you're able to take on maybe some higher repetitions, but because you're moving in different planes and using the muscles in different ways. So, and then you can progress to more single leg activities, uneven surfaces like BOSU, higher surfaces, where you're a step stool versus just working against the ground. And then also, we talked in an episode recently about rest intervals with swimming, and then the same thing occurs with the, jumping, a little bit more rest versus less rest between repetitions. So there's some nuances there. And, I would say be cautious about just Googling plyometrics and deciding to just start doing a bunch of them and follow somebody on whatever it is, Snapchat or whatever. I don't know what all the different medias are out there. I just know that, it can be dangerous if you just try to hook up and just start doing it like that. So maybe you get some help first if you're considering doing that. But I like to combine plyometrics in a sort of a boot camp way where you're doing some high load strengthening kind of, you're warming up and and then you're working on some strength stuff, and then you're doing a plyometric activity, and then you're doing a strength thing, and then you're doing a plyometric. So kind of bouncing around in between the two when you're working on it. I think there was something else I was going to say about it. Heavy lifting. Because people do ask me, well, what do you mean by heavy lifting? I mean, so if you're starting to introduce that, again, I always say it doesn't hurt to have a session where you're learning how to do it correctly. And I do have a blog post about this. We'll put a link in the show notes for that so you can read a little bit more about how to do it. But, there's this idea of, oh, well, you're supposed to do this many sets or reps at a certain percentage of your 1 rep max. Okay, so what do we mean by 1 rep max? It's like, oh, well, what's the heaviest load you can lift and do it with good form for one repetition? That's your maximum 1 rep. And then we work off of a percentage of that. Yeah.
Well,
fingers gone up.
I mean, I get a lot of questions about strength training, and so yes, you want to working like with a percentage of your 1 rep max is great, but you don't want to just go do your 1 rep max to figure out where you are. So there's some,
that's
like
exactly right.
You need to do some, like I call it like training to train. And so you're doing a whole bunch of stuff before. And so it may take you it could take 4 to 8 weeks before you are even ready to consider doing a 1 rep max, and prepping the body for that kind of stuff.
I don't even recommend anyone do a 1 rep max. So in that blog post that we're going to have in the link is that you don't really need to do it. It can be very taxing to do that 1 rep max. Not to mention the possibility of an injury with that, especially if you're doing it, trying to do it on your own. So I recommend starting with say you're, okay, well, let's just use bicep curl as an easy example, right? It could be like, well, I'm normally doing bicep curls and maybe I'm doing high repetition with a lower weight. And I usually, maybe I'm doing that with 4 pounds right now. We're just setting up an example.
And you're doing what? How many reps? 15?
Oh yeah, maybe I'm doing 15 or 20 and it's like, and I, maybe it's getting a little harder towards the end of that, but it's really not that hard. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm doing myself a favor there, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not bad. It's not doing nothing. It's just not what we're after. So then I might say, oh, well, you know what does it feel like to lift 6 pounds with my bicep curl? Oh, I'm able to do 15, but the last couple reps were a little difficult. Okay, I'm not close to my 1 rep max, right? No. But then I might say, well, I'm not going to do a 1 rep max. I'm not going to pick up this 20-pound weight and try it, But maybe I will take, maybe I'm take the 8-pound weights. What happens when I do the 8-pound weight? Oh, I'm able to do 10 reps and it's getting pretty difficult to hold my form and have really good form for the last couple of those. That's probably going to be where I'm going to work for a while.
100%.
And then it's going to become easier. So I don't recommend the 1 rep max at all. So that 10 pounds is not my 1 rep max. I know that, but I know that could be pretty darn close to my 70% of my 1 rep max. And I don't need to go hurt myself trying to figure out what that 1 rep max is.
You can feel when you're working hard.
Yeah. And I can feel and you don't want to be like, la, 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 and just circle your finger and pick one, right? So start easier and then work yourself up and see where is it where, I think for me, the rule of thumb is, where is it where I'm doing 10 sets and those last 3 are pretty tough for me to maintain form, but I can maintain it. Then the other thing I'm going to listen to is afterwards, did I have a decent amount of delayed onset muscle soreness the next day? 24 hours later, oh, you know what I did? And I'm, and I'm getting stronger and I'm starting to see results. As it gets easier, then I might jump up to 12 pounds, and then, oh, wait, 12 pounds was a little bit too much. Go back to 10 pounds.
Well, and it's interesting. I read an article. I'll have to see if I can find it, but it was talking about, we go in and we, you track your progression of weights, but that it was actually more beneficial to kind of listen. And maybe if there's a day where you're a little more tired. And so normally I do I use 10 pounds and I do my 10 reps, but I'm a little more tired one day. So I bump down to maybe 10 reps with 8 pounds. And then I go back the next time and I feel a little better. So I can bump up to 12. And even it's not every time, but you still, it's just like with any other of the disciplines, there's some room in there. And so if you think about what are you going for, you're going to feel you want to feel like you have worked your muscles. And what's that? How you are going to accomplish that today rather than being locked into what's on your app or your tracking sheet?
Oh, absolutely. So that's such a good point, because you could go in and be like, well, I don't understand. Why am I so tired and able to do that? That might have nothing to do with, you might have rested a couple of days even from upper extremity strength, or a whole week. It doesn't matter. The other things that you've done, other training, you might be a little dehydrated that day. You might be over fatigued from stress. Whatever it is, your body's telling you, this isn't working today. So we're not going to sit there and push it, because that day that you had to drop down to 8 pounds, that does not mean, and should not get into your head that, oh, I'm getting weaker, or, oh, I'm falling behind, I should do more. Mm-hmm. That is not the case. It means your body needs a little bit more recovery for whatever reason. There's multiple factors that could be involved in there. So that's why I don't love saying, oh my gosh, 1 rep max, you have to do this percentage of it, and this many weeks you should be doing this. Those are just guidelines, but that is not written in stone. You got to listen to, and that's just with anything, with all of our training that we talk to about with our people. But the idea is here that is changing our mindset, especially as distance runners, that going for these heavier weights and higher loads and resistance levels with shorter or fewer repetitions, it is beneficial. It's not a problem. It's not going to make you slower.
No, mm-hmm. It's going to make you more durable too.
Mm-hmm. And yes, the other injury prevention as well. Yes,
that's a huge thing for triathletes as well. But the other part of that is that, you know, it cycles with your season. And so like in the off season, lifting is going to look a little bit different than when you're in season. And, you know, when I have people, like, especially, you know, your training volume can get so big, especially with triathlon, that the strength training needs to take a back seat, but you can actually maintain your strength and get a huge amount of benefit from very minimal maintenance sessions during high training volumes. And it may only be it may be 10 or 15 minutes, and it's not going to compromise the other training that you have to do. But so it cycles through with like where you are in your season and what your body can handle at that time.
Yeah. And whether you have a race coming up, you're probably not going to do it for the 2 weeks before that, you know, and that's okay. You're not going to lose the effort that you gained. And this is where I think it's really helpful to have a personal coach, you know, a coach that's working with you, you know, on your stuff, because your needs might be a little bit different. You might need more recovery or less recovery. You might have it's not formulaic necessarily. It can depend on the athlete as well. But I do want to say that, you know, even if, you know, you're trying to balance this with your seasons, especially as a triathlete, but also as a runner, it does come into play as well. You're not doing as many you know, you're not doing the swimming and the biking, and this is so very different when we're talking about that. So with running, it's also an issue, but overall, you want to think of, like, let's look at this as a whole long-term picture of your career with the sport over multiple years. We're talking about when you start to introduce this, say we were, you know, working on it on a consistent basis. We have up weeks, we have down weeks, all that stuff. But we're looking at like 6 months before we're starting to get a lot of value out of that. You're building that over time. Once you are kind of 6 months into this, and again, probably someone's racing and season is sandwiched in there, and there's some differences. But if you think about taking those little breaks and coming down a little bit, that 6 months is going to stretch out for maybe 12 months to 2 years, where you're building up that strength and teaching your body to do that. So you're going to be looking at a longer span of time. And this isn't something like, you are going to notice differences with strengthening within 2 or 3 months, right, of doing it. But it is going to take over 6 months to see it showing up in this power and economy and performance. So just think about that timeline, and it's extended out, you know, if you're not able to do it, you know, as consistently, because you're also doing other things. So just keep that in mind, that don't ditch it because it didn't show up, you know, that quickly with your results as well. Yeah. Anything else I want to add here?
Just, I do get feedback from people, like the act. It's really interesting. I get feedback that people feel a lot better when they're doing it, even if it's, even if we're kind of in the training to train second and you're not doing a whole lot. And it feels to me like it sort of keeps muscles engaged and activated during, like, from a strength session. And then when we're going to swim, bike, or run or whatever you're doing, that they sort of recall and turn on a little bit faster or better. So there is, like, I do feel like even if you're not getting necessarily that, like, exact strength for, you know, right out of the chute, it does bring more muscles to the party and turn your body on in a way that kind of helps it perform, usually like right away. Thank you, Levi. I feel like people can feel that.
There is that phenomenon, and it is and I will even have people doing. So I have a workout that I give my runners that actually is, and again, this don't go follow this script. This is like an athlete that is ready for this, and this is what's working into their plan. But here's just an example of one. So it's someone training for a half marathon, for example. So it's a 4-mile run, but it's you're running. They're warming up, running a mile, and then we have a strength routine. And this strength routine is going to have some heavy lifting in it, and maybe some plyometric, depending upon the athlete. And then they're going to run another mile, and they're going to do it again, and then run another mile. And I do this at Run Clinic also to a certain extent. And the power that they feel on that second mile, third mile, fourth mile is tremendous. It is immediate.
It's super fun.
Again, it's that neuromuscular loading, that turning on of the switches. And that is immediate. Yeah. So there is kind of an immediate result, and then there's sort of this long-term building result. Absolutely. Really good point. All right. Yeah. So let's recap. The moral or the lesson for today is that don't shy away from, heavy lifting, thinking that it's going to be detrimental to sport. It's going to enhance it.
Triathletes are all about it.
I'm so glad to hear that. So we just have to bring in these middle and long distance runners and say, yes, this is increasing power, increasing run economy, and increasing performance.
Thanks so much for listening. And remember,
we are in this together. Until next time.